Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to today's briefing at the Jerusalem Press Club. My name is Talia Dekel-Fleissig. Tomorrow, the International Court of Justice at The Hague will hear allegations against Israel's military actions in Gaza, following South Africa's complaint last week, in which it argues that Israel is violating its obligations under the 1948 Genocide Convention. To discuss the current situation, the Jerusalem Press Club hosts Colonel in Reserves Advocate Pnina Sharvit Baruch, Senior Researcher and Head of the Program on Law and National Security at the INSS. She's also former Head of the International Law Department at the IDF's MAG unit. Colonel Sharvit Baruch, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So the ICJ, the court in which the proceedings are going to be held, has ruled against Israel in the past, in the case of the security fence at the West Bank, for instance. And furthermore, Israel usually refrains from cooperating with international investigations. So what can you tell us? What's different about this time? Why does Israel consider it more significant? And why is it sending representation?
Well, in the past, we had an advisory opinion. It was requested by the General Assembly on the wall issue or the security fence. And the advisory opinion is not binding, and Israel also viewed the whole request as something that is an attempt to enter into a contentious issue under the guise of an advisory opinion. We have another one, actually a current a request for an advisory opinion from December 2022 about the occupation or the legality of the occupation of Israel in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And here also Israel is in the meantime not participating actively. In this case, this is not an advisory opinion. It is actually a contentious case that derives its authority from the agreement of the State of Israel that is entrenched in the convention, the genocide convention on the prevention and punishment of genocide, which granted the ICJ the authority to deal with disputes with regard to this convention. So Israel doesn't have an argument about the jurisdiction itself. It could have still arguments about the request of South Africa and jurisdictional issues, but not about the jurisdiction itself. And I think also for Israel, this whole idea that it is blamed of carrying out genocide, a convention that Jews, Fray Lemkin was behind, which derived from what was done to Jews, is so outrageous. And I think Israel believes that it has a very good case. So it chose to appear because any kind of even an idea that Israel is carrying out genocide is really so preposterous and so I would say offending, and even on the emotional level, I think it's difficult for people in Israel to hear this kind of accusation. So I think the idea was we cannot leave this battleground without being there trying to defend ourselves.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. And of course, as an Israeli, it's something difficult to hear, but the people arguing against it aren't Israeli and of course have their own opinions. And should a ruling at the end of the day be made not in Israel's favor, because it could happen, what are the implications of this for Israel, for Israeli soldiers, officers, officials?
Well, there are the two phases here. There's at the moment what we are going to have this week are deliberations on the request of South Africa for interim measures, and these can be given in the coming weeks. So it's something that is very tangible and an immediate concern. There is the final decision on the in the request itself on a genocide that will take it could take years or a few years, a year or two. It really depends. But it's something that is in the long run. I think in the long run, of course, if Israel is if there's a decision saying that Israel carried out genocide, that would be devastating, I would say even, and I think it would be a victory to Hamas and to those that want to destroy the state of Israel. Because I think what we need to understand is that Israel is facing two levels of campaigns. Both have the same aim of destroying the state of Israel. The one is this active military campaign by the Hamas and the Iran and the Axis, its proxies, the Hezbollah, the Houthim, others potentially could also get involved, which is aiming at the physical destruction of the state of Israel. Israel is not currently facing a war that is not anything we've known before. We are under really a threat that I would say it's almost reaching an existential level. I know that outside Israel people don't understand this level of threat, but we are afraid for our lives, I would say. But this is, and there's another level, and this campaign is at the same time, there's another level of campaign on the international arena that is aimed not at criticizing Israel, which is legitimate, but on also destroying the state of Israel, the idea of the state of Israel, by destroying Israel's legitimacy. And in this campaign, which we've been seeing for years, it's received a lot of traction in this war, and we see now more than ever that it is linked to anti-Semitism, because when we see, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means no Israel, we also see at the same time chants against Jews and destroying the Jews. So this connection that they often, it was a question mark whether everyone that believes that Israel doesn't have a right to exist is also an anti-Semite. But now we see this connection is very strong. So Israel is fighting also on this level, and I think this procedure that we see of South Africa is part of this campaign to delegitimize Israel by saying that it is carrying out genocide is part of the idea of showing that Israel is a country that has no right to exist, and the two are combined, because the idea of this military campaign eventually is to put a lot of pressure on Israel on the fighting ground in order to prevent it from actually defending itself, because the idea is to put a lot of pressure on allies that are assisting Israel in this really existential threat that we are facing. And without the US support, we would have an active front with the Hezbollah. If anybody thinks differently, this is not the case, and Iran would be doing even more. So there would be pressure on Israel's allies. You cannot really assist a country that is carrying out genocide. That means that Israel would be left alone, isolated, and that would mean that they would be able to beat us on the grounds. And again, the Hamas is not seeking a peaceful resolution of the conflict. It's not seeking to end the occupation, the 1967 occupation, or resisting settlements. This is about Israel's right to exist. The Hamas doesn't accept that Israel has a right to exist. It's opposed to any peaceful resolution of the conflict. And this, if this succeeds, the South African request succeeds, if the court also falls into this rhetoric, it means terrorism will win, and it could lead eventually to Israel being isolated, weak, and potentially even destroyed. I hope not. I believe in our strength, in the fact that we don't have a choice. We have to fight for our lives here, but it is a genuine threat.
Very interesting, and also the timing of this whole thing really fits into your argument that it's part of a bigger strategy to weaken Israel during a defensive war. The IDF has often said that it takes measures sometimes more than other armies to avoid civilian casualties. But can you tell us whether intention is something that is even taken into consideration by judges at the end of the day? Is, even if civilians are harmed, is the intent to avoid that harm something that we're judged on?
So even when you're examining crimes of war or crimes against humanity, intention is important. But when talking about genocide, intention is the basis of this whole crime, because the crime is is based on the committing actions with the intention to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. This is the wording of the convention. So, of course, intention is relevant. I think here we have to talk about the actions themselves and the intention. And I think to say that Israel has an intention to destroy the Palestinian people, I think it's really, I don't know, it's so divorced from the reality. I've been involved for years, since I was in the military from 1989 to 2009. From 1993, I was involved directly in the peace negotiations with the Palestinians. Even after retiring in 2009, I've been involved in rounds and rounds of track tours with Palestinians trying to reach a peaceful resolution of the conflict. I believe, by the way, that we need to reach a peaceful resolution of the conflict, that we need to acknowledge the right of the Palestinians for self-determination. I would like to believe in the two-state solution. It's difficult today to see how it works, but I'm there. I believe in compromises, but I also believe that the Jews also have a right to self-determination. Okay, and I think that the idea that we're trying to destroy the Palestinian people, first of all, you have people living in Israel that are citizens of Israel, that many view themselves as Palestinians, and they have full rights, equal rights, and we have we work together, and of course many doctors, but we also have even in our institute we have Arab researchers. These are our brothers, our sisters. By the way, they are very opposed to what the Hamas did, and they are supporting Israel in its fight against the Hamas. They know that the Hamas is not the Palestinians. Okay, and then we have Palestinians in the West Bank and Palestinians in the Gaza Strip that we know that we need to. They're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. They want us. Maybe some of them would like us to go, but we're not going. And maybe some Israelis would like them to go, but they're not going anywhere. And eventually we will have to reach a peaceful resolution of the conflict. What we are doing in Gaza Strip is nothing about destroying or murdering Palestinians. What Israel is facing is this threat that is on a level that really, I think it's very difficult, I think, from people from Western countries around the world, maybe Ukraine can understand us, that are not facing this kind of threat to their existence, for an enemy just a kilometer away from villages, 50 kilometers away from where I am sitting, that is aim is to destroy the state of Israel, and they have the capabilities. Now we see it's not only the rockets, it's entering into Israel, thousands of terrorists, murdering, capturing. Their plans was to reach even further. If the Hezbollah does the same from the north, we are fighting this threat. We don't want to kill civilians. It is against our rules of operation, against our moral obligations. But what the Hamas does, and I think this is very important to understand again, the whole rationale of the Hamas, it's the way it operates, its modus operandi is to entrench itself inside the civilian areas, underneath the civilian areas. There's a whole underground town in Gaza, they call it. The Palestinians talk about it. And it's all for military purposes. And it's under the soldiers say, every house we go into, in the children's room, you find an entrance to a pier. You go into a school, there's a pier entering to the tunnel and weapons stored, the mosques, the hospitals, everything. The Hamas has been investing years in making Gaza one big fortified military base with one aim: to attack and destroy Israel, not with the aim of making the lives better for the Palestinians in Gaza Strip. That's what we wanted. That's we were fooled to think that the Hamas maybe cares about them, and there were permits given to the Palestinians to come and work in Israel. And all these ideas of commercial and industrial zones, combined industrial zones, those that are pushing for these peaceful kinds of projects of projects between Israel and Palestine. Why were those living in the kibbutzim where the Hamas purposefully went and murdered, slaughtered, and butchered, and tortured, and mutilated those that were the people that were helping the Gazans, that wanted the peace, that were driving them to hospitals, that were talking about all these joint ventures. So this is not just killing Israelis and Jews, it's killing peace. That's what they aimed at. And we don't want to kill the Palestinians. I want to live peacefully with them. But the Hamas, the Hamas forces us to if we want to eliminate this enemy of Jews, of Israelis, of Palestinians, of peace, of the world, of the liberal world, of the Western world, if we want to eliminate it, there's no option but to act in this densely populated area where they use the civilians as shields. And unfortunately, despite giving warnings, despite trying our best, civilians get harmed. To say that this is our intention, it's completely twisting the reality.
Your words are very clear. There are some questions about the ICJ panel itself. I wanted to get to that in a minute, but I want to carry from what you're saying now, just while we're already on the topic. The letter itself doesn't mention October 7th, doesn't mention the Hamas atrocities, anything that you just described. And we know that Israel has been collecting evidence of what happened, what it's been able to obtain, at least from October 7th. Do you know what it's planning on doing with this? Is it going to file its own complaint at the ICJ against Hamas? Is that even possible? What's it doing with all this evidence?
Well, the Hamas, again, the convention, what the Hamas aim is to carry out genocide because their claimed aim is to destroy the state of Israel, to destroy Jews, and they managed to do some of it, at least thousands of people that were killed and injured and kidnapped, 240 people. But they are not party to the convention. Palestine is, by the way, the state of Palestine. But I don't know if Israel is planning to do something with respect to initiating something with regard to Palestine with the genocide. I think because I personally don't think that Hamas represents Palestine. Okay, I do believe that there are the Palestinians that don't believe in this, and again, I don't know if it will really help. There are also criminal. There's a criminal investigation in the International Criminal Court, the ICC, which also is also dealing also with the Hamas, with the crimes of Hamas. But again, the problem is that Hamas doesn't care. The Hamas doesn't care about the law. They don't acknowledge the law. What they carried out on the 7th of October is the worst crimes imaginable. I unfortunately saw the footage and read the testimonies because I wanted to be sure that, you know, what I'm speaking about, that I really know what I'm talking about. And then I couldn't sleep for nights. It still enters into my dreams. The most terrible things you can imagine to little children, young girls, and then elderly people, really terrible. And also they are all the time firing rockets. They are all the time, they are using their civilians. They don't spare their civilians. Using civilians as shields is itself a war crime. And there was a Hamas leader who was interviewed on the Russian TV, and they told him, why, when there are bombings from Israel, why don't you let the Palestinian civilians go into the tunnels as a shelter? And he said, why should we? The tunnels are for our fighting. The Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, they're refugees. They're the responsibility of UNRWA, of the UN. And so they are enemies of the Palestinians too, and we are not trying to destroy the Palestinians. The ones that are the ones that initiated all this, that are leading to all this destruction knowingly. They were trying to pull Israel to do this. Is the Hamas, and there is a way. And you know, South Africa is calling for a ceasefire. There is a way. There is a way. If Hamas surrenders, it could be an immediate ceasefire. If they surrender, if they agree to give up all their weapons, if they free all the hostages, it's in their hands. If someone wants to put pressure to stop this war, that's the pressure.
Understood. One journalist is asking if you can tell us how many judges will be on the panel, if we know anything about them. And I'll add a next part of the question in terms of what faith do you have in this institution at the end of the day to be able to objectively try this case?
There are 15 judges in the ICJ, and they all sit in each case. So it's a full panel of all 15 judges. They are elected by, there's a geographical distribution. So you have judges from the different regions and areas of the world. And unfortunately, these judges, although they are esteemed jurists, there is a known tendency to vote in these kinds of cases that have a political significance by the political, I would say, interests of their countries. So it's not really an objective judicial forum. So that's, of course, worrying, because we know that there's such a campaign against Israel, and also the referral is all the time to the UN, human rights bodies reports, and we know that that is also very, very politicized. And I didn't believe until this conflict, because I never delved into it, but I have read all the declarations of the UN human rights, different human rights rapporteurs, and they are so one-sided against Israel that it's really say heartbreaking, the disillusionment of the UN as being something objective. So there is here a fear that politics will enter into the decision as it did in 2004. We don't trust really in these institutions that single out Israel and twist the law when it comes to Israel. But I hope maybe they surprise me.
Understood. One journalist is asking about the statements being made by Israeli ministers who are not even necessarily on the war cabinet, but we know that at least part of the complaint by South Africa is referring to some of these statements that can be interpreted as calling for genocide if they are seeking to depopulate Gaza from its Palestinian population, or at least a significant amount. How does this come into play? Can statements be made, be construed as calls for genocide?
Statements are important. First of all, if they you can learn from the intent of the country from statements, or the statements themselves can be the crime of inciting to genocide. But here, so we have to understand, when it comes to the intent, the only statements that are relevant are those that are involved in giving the forces directives. And here they really chose and picked sentences of the Prime Minister, of the Minister of Defense, that were, I think, also taken a bit out of context. Also, especially when it comes to the Minister of Defense, these are things he said in the beginning of just after the 7th of October, we will not supply water, we will not supply. But eventually Israel did supply water, not only enabled water to be, you don't have an obligation, by the way, to supply the enemy. And Gaza is not an occupied territory by Israel. The law just is really clear about that. It's just a political argument to say that Israel had effective control. If we had effective control, how did the Hamas do what it did? I mean, and effective control is the term, is the legal test to see if it's an occupied area. So yes, there was words that were said that were very strong, but they are not genocide. And the ones that do allude to wiping up or out Gaza, and that was said by different politicians, either politicians from the right-wing parties. I personally are not very sympathetic towards them. I don't know if they are incitement for genocide. They are incitement for violence, I would say, maybe, and I think they're improper. And I know there are those that saying that they should be investigated by the Israeli authorities, but they are not. They don't have impact on what Israel actually did. These are people that are back from the backbenchers, very extreme politicians. You have them all around the world today. Extreme politicians. What they say doesn't represent what the countries are doing. And I do want to say one point about why I'm not now in the IDF, and I'm not involved in the decisions. Why am I convinced that we are acting as morally as we can and as legally as we can and certainly not carrying out genocide, is because until 3 months and a half ago, we had protesters in the streets protesting against this government because of the fear of its harming democracy, democratic values, moral values of Israel. And I personally went to give a lecture. I was also one of the protesters, okay? And I went to give a lecture to pilots, reservists, pilots, and also operators of drones. And I was talking about the legal front, the international legal front, and what happens if our system, our judicial system and our legal system is not independent, how that could impact complementarity and the possibility of investigations against soldiers and senior officers abroad. And then they told me, these pilots, they told me, okay, but that's not what we worried about. When we are threatening that we will not come, and when we are called to our reserve duty will not come, what we are worried about is if we can't trust the government to give us orders that are moral. And we don't want to do something that we feel is against our moral standards, like killing civilians. And all these pilots are there now for the last 3 months, day and night, doing this job. And I'm sure they're doing it because they know that what they are instructed to do is in compliance with their moral standards. I am a peace activist almost. I believe in morals. I believe in people's rights. And I support this war because this is a just war. We are fighting a vicious enemy that wants to destroy us, that is hiding behind these civilians, shooting at Palestinians trying to leave the area when they want to do so. We don't have any other option. If we don't do that, they will win. They are using these civilians in a way that will forces Israel to either carry out actions that lead to destruction, terrible destruction. There's terrible destruction in Gaza. To lead to civilian casualties, there are many civilian casualties in Gaza. I'm not sure that the numbers that the Hamas is publishing is accurate, but there are many civilian casualties. But the alternative, if we didn't do that, is that the Hamas would continue to threaten us. We can't get rid of the Hamas military capabilities of its threat on Israel without this, unfortunately. And our pilots would not be doing that. And our soldiers, and I know soldiers, reservists that are there, they are with high moral standards. They would not be fighting there if they thought that what we are doing is a genocide. They would just simply say no. And they're not saying no, they're saying yes, and they're going and they're getting killed and they're getting wounded and they're getting and they're coming back with injuries and with psychological impacts, and they're doing that because we believe in the justice of our cause. Unfortunately, the world doesn't see it this way because things come out in a twisted way, and again, my heart breaks for the Palestinians in Gaza. I really feel sorry for their suffering, but this suffering was brought about by the Hamas.
We're actually almost out of time, but there are just a few questions that I want to make sure to ask on behalf of the reporters. You already started talking about the judicial reform events prior to the war, leading up to the war. Do you think that even having come so close to executing this reform has any perhaps any kind of repercussions on the international legal system? Is this something that would be taken into consideration? Are the courts weaker than they were in the past? Is Israel no longer able to continue to carry out its own independent investigations, in your opinion?
Courts are still very strong. They just ruled out they just deemed 2 laws, basic laws of this Knesset as that they are not valid, which is interfering, and it's a big dispute in Israel, but they clearly are very independent. And even those that didn't agree to cancel the laws, most of them said that the court can interfere even in basic laws, which is our constitution, in cases where the attempts to change the basic norms, principles that the state is built upon, which are the norms of morality and equality. So I think that we still have a very strong system. The people there are very professional. I hope it helps in the international arena. Again, we are under this campaign in the international arena, which is very well orchestrated and supported, and it's very difficult. It's very frustrating. You feel that you're saying things, and it's very difficult to persuade. And of course, the pictures coming out of Gaza are heartbreaking. I can understand it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Israel is doing something illegal. I think the question is, what would any other country facing similar kinds of threats do in our situation? Unfortunately, the Hamas brilliantly, like ISIS, they know how to twist things. I mean, and somehow persuade the young people around the world that they are the just ones. This is really a brutal terrorist organization that kills its own. I mean, there are no human rights there, no women's rights, no LGBT rights, no freedom of expression, nothing, all corruption and brutality, and just putting their civilians there to die with one aim: to destroy the state of Israel, not to benefit there, not to have for the Palestinians a better life. I wish the Palestinians a better life. It's in my interest. So again, how will the world treat this? I don't know. The politics are very difficult in the world. We have governments on our side because they understand it. We have the wide public that is everything. It's a complicated situation. In the world today, everything is so shallow. It's all black and white. The discourse is so shallow. I hope somebody manages to put in, you're the reporter that I don't see you, but just put in the complexity. Okay, that's all I ask. Don't say Israel is right or wrong. Just it's complicated.
It's very clear, and of course, we all share the same vision for peace for everybody. I will just ask one last question because it's being asked by two different reporters, including one based in Johannesburg. Despite the fact that you said that it could take years until a ruling is reached, assuming that the war won't go on for years, but in theory, if a ruling is made during the time that the war is still continued against Israel, is Israel obligated to stop its war or do an immediate pause? How does that work?
So there could be interim measures, could be in a matter of weeks. The final decision would take years. I really hope that the court doesn't give an interim order that would compel Israel to choose between abiding by a judicial order or defending itself. And then I think probably it might ignore the order if it's if the order is stop carrying out genocide, then there would be no problem to comply with it, because I don't think we are carrying out genocide. So it's really how the order will be worded. I know that Israel has a respect to the law. I was the head of the international department. My job was to see that international law is incorporated in the plans, in the orders, in all the decisions on tactics, on weapons, in the IDF. That was my job. I was there sitting inside the decision rooms during ongoing operations. We had legal advisors there 24/7 in all the decision-making areas, because we care about the law. And so I really hope we don't have to face this kind of dilemma, and that the court doesn't issue something like an order that would put us into this dilemma. But I think if the order is just generally, to protect civilians, this is something that we are trying to do anyway. And maybe if the order can say something about the Hamas, I doubt it. Maybe it could also be useful if it is more balanced. The more balanced it is, I guess it will be easier for Israel to take it more seriously.
Okay, very clear. Pnina Sharvit Baruch of the Institute for National Security Studies. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye, everybody, and make sure to tune into further Jerusalem Press Club programming throughout the war.